Have you ever jammed to a Blackpink song? How about a BTS song? Korean music has been the talk of the town lately. Today, we will look into one of the oldest Korean songs, a song of both sorrow and hope, Arirang. No one knows exactly when or where it was first sung, but Arirang is believed to have originated from Mount Koyang in Gyeongsan, Gangwon Province. It is said that the song is related to the legend of Aoraji, a tragic story where a bachelor and a maiden, unable to cross the Lake Aoraji, sing a song to express their sadness. In another version, the bachelor attempts to cross Aoraji, but drowns, singing as he dies. Arirang's lyrics express the pain of separation as well as grief and longing. However, instead of just frustrations of love, most Koreans relate Arirang to hardships in life. The song depicts Han. But Arirang is also an anthem of hope and dreams. When the Japanese Imperial Army invaded Korea, Arirang became a symbol of resistance. During the March for movement in 1919, it is said that the protesters sang the folk song as defense against the Japanese rule. The 1926 silent film Arirang, which depicted Korea under Japanese rule, also evoked strong emotions amongst the people. Arirang differs from region to region, having more than 3,600 variations of 60 different versions. Despite these differences, at the end of the day, Arirang will always be a song that encapsulates not only emotions and tragedies, but also Korean culture, tradition, and history.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last day of keynote lectures of the first Philippine-Korea Youth Forum with the theme Borderless Collaboration and Exchange. PKYF is organized by UP Ariang, co-presented by UP Korea Research Center and Pinoy Scholars sa Korea, made possible by APOP and JK Network Services, in partnership with ADSA Animo Anyong PNU and UP Uyo Muyo, in cooperation with Blue Hangok Society and FTU International Studies Society. Also brought to you by Ateneo Celadon and co-promoted by Korean Cultural Center in the Philippines. I am Adarna Palad from UP Ariang and I will be your host for today. This session is both live on Facebook and on YouTube. Today will be under the economy and trade track and we will be learning 2 keynote lectures from our invited speakers. Feel free to drop in your questions in the comment section down below anytime during the lectures, and we will be answering those during the open forum later on. And for everyone who's streaming this and would like to share it on your social media account, please use the hashtag PKYF2021 and hashtag Transcending Borders. And also, don't forget to tag UP Area Social. Now, for our first speaker, he is a professor emeritus in the Faculty of Economics, Seoul National. He earned a BA from Seoul National University and PhD at International Monetary Fund, Paul School of Advanced International Studies, Johns Hopkins University. and Faculty of Economics, University of Tokyo, UCSD, School of International Relations and Pacific Studies during the winter quarter in 2006 to 2011. He was visiting scholar at Korea Institute of Finance in 2013 to 2014 and Korea Institute of International Studies in 2015 to 2016.
All right, sorry about that. It seems that our moderator got disconnected. So let me just introduce our speaker once again. Our first speaker for today is a professor emeritus in the Faculty of Economics, Seoul National University. He has served on, as professor of international economics and econometrics at Seoul National University since 1981 until February 2013. He earned a BA from Seoul National University and PhD from Clark University. He also served as visiting professor at International Monetary Fund, Paul Nitt School of Advanced International Studies, Johns Hopkins University, and the Faculty of Economics, University of Tokyo. He has lectured Korean economy as visiting professor at UCSD School of International Relations and Pacific Studies during winter quarter in 2006 to 2011. He was visiting scholar at Korea Institute of Finance in 2013 to 2014 and Korea Institute for International Economic Policy in 2014 to 2017. He was the winner of Cheongnam Award in 1988 by Korea Economic Association for his study on the estimation of capital stock. He served as president of Korean Economic Society in 1997, director of Institute for World Economy, Seoul National University in 1996, and president of Korea International Economic Association in 2009. He also served as member of Presidential Commission for Policy Planning during 1993 to 1996. He was director of Center for National Competitiveness, Seoul National University during 2002 to 2013. He also served as chairman of Asia Claims Committee during 2009 to 2013 and now serves as advisor to the committee. He served as consultant to Asian Development Bank, World Bank, Institute of Developing Economies in Tokyo, and APOSMEDEC for training in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, September 11 to 15, 2017. So to talk about the post-Corona-19 economic outlook and perspectives on Korea-Philippines relations, let's call on Dr. Hak K.
Okay, welcoming everyone in this very meaningful podium. I was invited by Philippine-Korea Youth Forum 2021, and I remember my kind of recent visit to UP, University of Philippines. I made a visit almost like 2 years ago, of course, before the outbreak of Corona. And I remember my lecture there, and I enjoyed meeting with many UP students. And I also was invited to present some of recent economic theory and economic sort of empirical studies at the conference UP organized. And I was very privileged to be invited and to meet with many Philippine students. I understand this forum, youth forum, started recently, and but I congratulate on all of you, particularly hosting institute, to take this event and to host this event, this conference online. Right, still we are in the middle of Corona-19. Okay, so Let me start my sort of presentation by showing you the sort of contents and why I am here, explaining why I am here to deliver what kind of topic. The topic is about post-Corona-19 economic outlook and perspectives, particularly on Korea-Philippine relations, of course, economic relations. Next page, please. Yeah. My talk today will be based on these following contents. First, I will take a look at COVID-19 as a global pandemic, and then move on to new Asian contagion situation and economics of COVID-19 pandemic as a catastrophe. In other words, we need some kind of economic theory. And I found that theory, relevant theory, is pandemic as a catastrophe. And so economics of catastrophe. Why do we need to explain in terms of theory? Because whatever economic phenomena happens, for example, some pollution or earthquake or this type of pandemic invades us, invades into us. We need some kind of minimum economic theory. Otherwise, we cannot really react and predict outcome and the future. Only we could do it on very ad hoc base, not really theoretical base. So still, even though there is no well-designed theory, we still need a theory to explain this terrible consequence of COVID-19 pandemic. So I will briefly take a look at economics of catastrophe and then move on to productivity shocks of COVID-19 pandemic, sort of recollecting 2020 last year's productivity shocks around the globe. And then I want to emphasize the importance of health policy and strategies, because health policy is a typical what economists call public good. Public good concept is applied, and health policy is public good in the sense that if you are getting sick and if you are sort of contacted by COVID-19, then others, your families and other people will be affected to some extent. So this is kind of, it's not you are just like spending money on Coke or spending money on pizza. In that case, we call private principle or private exclusion policy. That is, my consumption of a bottle of Coke with a piece of pizza excludes your consumption of the same pizza, slice of pizza, or Coke. That's my own sort of consumption. But public health, like COVID-19 pandemic, when you are affected, you are not alone. You live in a society with a family and with social people. Therefore, you will affect others' health to some extent. So that's the reason why health policy is so important. Mobilizing public goods concept, which is a core part of economic theory. Okay. Lastly, I will take a look at macroeconomic policy imperatives for this region. And also, I will briefly mention, could there be next normal emerging from Asia. Is there going to be Asia is going to be equipped with the next normal, so-called? What is next normal in Asia after pandemic? Okay. Last two chapters, sort of sections, not chapters, I'm trying to describe Philippines and South Korea long-term development prospect, how it performed, two countries, how two countries are heading into the future. And finally, more specifically, I want to take a look at bilateral trade and investment between Korea and the Philippines. Okay. Next page, please. COVID-19 as a global pandemic, I will describe. WHO, as you know, has declared the coronavirus outbreak a global pandemic. March 21, 2020, last year, and United States side blaming China, trying to conceal the outbreak of coronavirus, and therefore released their news and their problem to WHO belatedly. So, in other words, the official outbreaking date in China was at the end of December 2019. And there was a kind of 3 or 4 months delay, they claim, United States side. At any rate, WHO belatedly declared coronavirus as pandemic. The economics of catastrophe, the relevant theory, drove me into Jack Hauser's 1996 article, which is referring to the economics of catastrophes. At the time, of course, Jack Hauser was not mentioning pandemic or coronavirus. He wrote this article about the economics of catastrophe based on 1995 Hanshin earthquake in Japan. And Hanshin earthquake in Japan in 1995 was very devastating earthquake. More than 6,000 people died and 25,000 casualties. Over $30 billion loss, And 2011, East Japan earthquake came, with a lot larger Richter 9.0 scale on March 11th. Of course, Checkhouse's writing of the economics of catastrophe was before 2011, just after 1995. Of course, 1996, his publication year is just after Hanshin earthquake in Japan. And, what he argued is a lot of this natural catastrophe like earthquake can have a negative impacts on economy in the sense that usually there are not only natural sort of cause, like earthquake is something not really man-made cause. But what he argues is that the repercussion effect, in other words, the consequences of this large-scale catastrophe is affecting the society in the sense that a lot of these society are not ready. In other words, they made man-made error or man-made establishment. For example, Jack Hauser was referring to Hanshin. Hanshin area is basically Kobe, near Osaka area in Japan. And he argues that housing there and the infrastructure was too crowded in narrow space. And therefore, earthquake could generate repercussion effect, very devastating repercussion effect. If Hanshin earthquake occurred, not necessarily in crowded area, and if Japanese government and people were more ready for that kind of large scale earthquake. In other words, there could be not only natural disaster but also man-made error, man-made sort of crowdedness. This kind of thing can sort of enlarge or magnify kind of loss, over $30 billion loss. And then, after Jack House's writing of the catastrophe, 2011, as you know, East Japan earthquake came through. Again, if like nuclear power plant and other infrastructure were more securely built and more securely ready-made, then some of the casualties, some of the catastrophe could have been avoided. But, again, economics of catastrophes is blaming not only natural disaster itself, but also man-made error, crowdedness, things like that. Another example of this catastrophe is AIDS virus spread. By 2018, 770,000 people died. More global and longer-term impacts were left. Of course, AIDS virus spread is different from coronavirus spread because usually AIDS virus spread was the consequence of inappropriate, sexual relationship or whatever. So it's more sort of contagious disease. On the other hand, coronavirus is also contagious disease, but the degree of spread is much more stronger than AIDS. So it's more open sort of pandemic to some extent. Next. So coronavirus is a unique, explosive pandemic. AIDS virus catastrophe is limited to inappropriate sexual relationship and were spread to specific multiples. You see, AIDS virus was spread to specific multiples, but coronavirus is spread to non-specific multiple. You don't know where you will get affected by this coronavirus. Several years ago, we had MERS, lasted 3 years before its complete fade out. So, we may have another year or two to last. Complete fade out may not occur within this year. We are still in the middle of pandemic. It is explosive spread to non-specific mass. Lockdown approach became inevitable. According to Wikipedia and WHO, Spanish influenza lasted 1 full year from June 1918 to May 1919, with 3 consecutive explosions. First explosion, second explosion, and third explosion. Death rate, all different. Death rate-wise, second explosion had the highest death rate toll. and 15 million people affected. So this is global history. Next. A new Asian contagion. I have sort of tried to update various statistics of contagion. Next, please. You can see it here, the various selected countries' case. And of course, we can see our side, the Philippines, for example. This has not been updated as of now, but it was updated up to first week of April or something like that. Okay. And South Korea too, right? Number of total deaths, Philippines is not insignificant, fairly large. So you are still in the very emergency case, a very troubling time in Manila and elsewhere in the Philippines. Okay. Next. So what is economics of COVID-19 pandemic as a catastrophe? The coronavirus pandemic is causing economic recession and depression, right? Next. First, it was felt in the oil market. Why? Why at the first time last March, exactly 1 year ago, why oil price has been reduced by 50% or something like that. Oil market was shocked because people were afraid of traveling, a lot of lockdown policy everywhere, no travel, airline all stopped, automobiles were not used that often. All these things reducing demand for oil. Therefore, oil price went down. Recently, as the economies in particularly oil-consuming nations recover, as they recover from the worst recession, this oil price has been recovered somewhat, but not still at the height, at the level of pre-2019 level. Second, next, COVID-19 impacts on unemployment and finances. A record unemployment rate occurred. US and OECD everywhere. Particularly, the loss of working hours in Asia during the second quarter of 2020 is equivalent to 125 million people unemployed due to shutdown of factories and shops in China and other Asian countries. So Asia was very severely affected by this COVID-19. Next. For example, ILO reports the worst crisis in labor market after World War II. Okay. Asia Pacific particularly were very vulnerable. Next. So at the beginning, there was a debate on economic outlook. There were pessimist group last March, like about 1 year ago. Several economists were referring to it will cause permanent recession and the world economy can fall into 1929 Great Depression. But on the other hand, there were some kind of other people guardedly optimistic. So V-shaped recovery might be possible, they argued. Okay. So there were two schools, pessimistic schools and guardedly optimistic schools. Next. In the end, there is a so kind of Garber and Romer, who was the 2018 Nobel Prize winner, arguing that if this situation continues, I'm talking about last year, about second quarter, third quarter situation, we may live, but the economy will die. That's a very symbolic kind of remark. We may live, but the surrounding economy will die. So they were arguing for not complete lockdown, but partial lockdown. But as you know, recently, U.S. has rolled out the program of vaccination aggressively, but still the statistics show that their pandemic spread is still persistently high. And this is causing a lot of concern, because if pandemic recovery from pandemic is not adequately made, then of course economic recession will be prolonged and recovery is not likely. So it could be L-shaped, almost a persistent recession, prolonged recession type. Okay, so it all depends on how we deal with this. And more recent stories, more recent kind of projection by World Bank and OECD are all projecting kind of V-type recovery. Okay. But this V-type recovery all depends on the vaccination result. And as you know, there is a vaccination divide. Only the rich countries can afford getting vaccination. The bulk of nations, poor and relatively not rich nations, are suffering from lack of vaccination, as you know. So world is divided between those nations having vaccination and those nations which do not have an access to vaccination. Even South Korea right now, it is becoming political scandal right now, because the government promised they will roll out vaccination effective program, but still only less than 5% of the population are vaccinated. Very late, South Korea, in terms of the progress being made on vaccination. Next. So there was a currently debate on economic outlook. Janet Yellen, who is the US Treasury Secretary, she is very optimistic. And she wants to push for the record scale sort of fiscal package, stimulus package. And recently, new president of United States, he has proposed additional $1 trillion for education of younger generation and poor family children and so forth. So almost like limitless fiscal stimulus package are proposed. And therefore, she is optimistic. She thinks that, U.S. economy can recover very quickly. But Chairman Powell, he thinks there will be another 2 or 3 years. U.S. economy will not be completely recovered. Unemployment rate may still range 7 to 8, 10%, and therefore interest rate is not likely to be raised. That's what he predicts. Next. So this is unemployment rate. U.S. skyrocketed and then sort of calmed down, but still persistently high level. Next. Productivity shocks of COVID-19 pandemic. This is the kind of reflection how firms in this area affected. The same description can be made, for example, and we can argue that there are roughly 4 stages of development, productivity shock. Next, I will just sketch. So at the beginning, first shock is, for example, when there was a shock, Corona-19, Korean firms invested in Chinese market, China, they were affected because they could not hire laborers due to Corona. So several of those sub-factories, Korean factories located in China, were closed down. So there is a supply shock. Aggregate supply curve cuts back. And then later, because those laborers are losing their jobs, they were cut off, they didn't have income, so demand for goods go down. This is second stage. And this further demand reduction caused supply cutback. Oh, people are not buying vegetables. People are not buying meats. So production cuts back further, and so on. So these multiple stages of productivity shock, Asian firms were affected. First time, supply shock. Second time, demand shock. Third time, another second round of supply shock, and then demand shock. Okay, next slide. So, consequence is, of course, rising income inequality and economic depression loop. Okay, next. Health policy and strategies. As I mentioned at the beginning, health policy is very important. So, for example, for the Philippines, of course, a lot of wage earners, laborers would like to have minimum wage law and higher wages. But more important than higher wages is health security. So in other words, unilateral, national health insurance coverage. And paying for health insurance by the government and by wage earners are more important than increasing minimum wage law. Because once this health policy fails, everybody can get affected. by Corona-19. Then the society stops, the economy stops. So even though health policy is so important, it can be very ignored by many policy authorities because it is very costly policy, but still, rather than raising wage rate, Philippines, for example, need to invest more money into social insurance, healthcare insurance, nationwide insurance, so that anyone who gets affected can have a almost free test from the hospital. Protect his or her health. There's nothing more than important than this. Next page. And the reason why it is important, we call this is the pandemic curve, and if health facilities are not well equipped, if there are no several hospitals which can handle coronavirus 19 affected patients, then this curve will be red circle. Now, the capacity in the Philippines can be maximum this line. If number of patients is greater than they can absorb, you can observe. To protect that, you need to flatten the curve, slow down, particularly those patients who are into intensive care. If there are too many number of patients who needs intensive care, Philippine Manila facility cannot afford taking care of all those patients. So to flatten this curve is very important health policy. Next. So there is economic cost of suppression strategy, and that's why some European countries wanted to have experiment with partial lockdown policy. But again, the effectiveness of partial lockdown policy is still very skeptical. History tells us in the United States, when there is a Spanish, pneumonia, Spanish influenza, the city which has most severe lockdown policy, for example, Philadelphia, was the fastest city to recover when they went into the recovery period. In other words, partial lockdown could be prolonged, but the recovery could be prolonged too. So there is a, cost and benefit, whether or not you go by complete lockdown or partial lockdown. Okay, that has something to do with the suppression strategy. Next. So macro policy imperatives is very simple. You have to just put down more money available as possible. Massive fiscal package is inevitable everywhere. United States, Japan, many other countries. So even in Philippines, Philippine government is inevitably should put down more money in terms of fiscal package. Next. Could the next normal emerge from Asia? This is a kind of article put forward by economists and McKinsey and company. What they are describing is the situation that, for example, Apple Computer or Apple company in the United States used to outsource from China. Now, if China is a hotbed of Corona-19, they cannot have their assembly plants being made from China. So assembled parts and components could not be made in China. So there is a strong tendency to get out of Asia and put their facilities near Mexico, around the United States. That trend they refer to next normal, new Asian normal. Now, is Philippines going to be affected? I don't know, but many multinational firms which try to invest in the Philippines may reconsider Philippines investment if COVID-19 situation in the Philippines does not improve, right? So to protect your nation from happening this next normal in Asia, you have to, the first priority in the Philippines should be given to vaccination, effective vaccination, and to protect people from the spread of COVID-19. Next. Next. Uh, what I want to do is always, in long-term perspective, Philippines and South Korea was a kind of model economy for comparison by famous economists such as Lucas, who earned the Nobel Prize in 1991 or something. And he was making frequent visit to my campus. And according to his famous article written 1993, Philippines and South Korea are compared. And typically he argued that Philippines and South Korea had a very similar socio-economic conditions in 1960, but somehow after 30 years, by 1988, per capita GDP in South Korea grew at the rate of 6.2%, Philippines long stagnation. And why do I refer to this article? Because it is a Philippine and South Korea forum, student forum. And Lucas did not find a solution to this divergence between South Korea and Philippines, but he thought that South Korea was able to use more open network of human capital. And Philippines, of course, Philippines education was there, good enough, but social mobility within Philippines. In other words, the Philippines was more kind of rich and the poor kind of divergence. So they could not mobilize their human capital more effectively. South Korea, after land reform in 1949, became almost classless society. So it's more open-ended. To promote yourself, you have to go to attend good college, good job. This kind of openness in human capital buildup was devastatingly important factor. That's what he explained, Lucas. Next. So this is the initial condition, very important, because you are students, you want to take a look at more deep look at this comparison between Philippines and South Korea. Next. And then this is after Lucas' paper. I tried to collect data on Philippines and South Korea. You know, Philippines has improved the performance. Lucas was referring to 1.23% growth period, per capita GDP wise. According to my statistics, Philippines made remarkable progress from 1989 to 2019, 2.3, almost 2.6%. On the other hand, South Korea stumbled. High growth era was ending. And from 1989, Korea became just middle growth country, medium growth country. So Philippines is catching up. South Korea is falling behind to some extent. So history repeats itself. Next. This is the chart. Always we use US per capita income, GDP, as benchmark nation's case. Korea made a lot of catch-up, but recently kind of stalling back. And Philippines tried to catch up, still a lot divergent. So, as a use of Philippines in your nation, you have a lot of things to achieve. You have to make economic growth to catch up. Not only South Korea, but also United States at some point. So that's the mission of Philippine youth. Next. So this is growth rate. Next. More specifically, let us take a look at issues in bilateral trade and investment between Korea and Philippines. And all shows you very negative growth and slowdown. Exports, imports from Philippines, both affected by coronavirus pandemic. Next. This shows also very drastic reduction from 2018. Next. See, manufacturing investment, Korean investment in manufacturing sector of Philippines are record sliding down. Only a few construction sites are lively. Next. So bilateral trade, as I showed you, has been affected by corona. Next. Export and import all affected. Next. And investment. The charts show everything. Next. So I'm sorry that the pictures do not look promising. And after Corona-19, both nations are affected in terms of trade and investment. But let us remain hopeful that as things get better in Manila, in Philippines, and in Seoul, in South Korea, our economy could be recovered. Both economies could be recovered. And I'm hopeful that we can have more bilateral exchanges, not only investment, but also trade. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Pio, for that insightful talk. We learned how COVID-19 caused recession and depression in the economy, prospect of possible recoveries and performances, the economic costs we are facing because of lockdown measures, predictions for the new normal for Asia, and a comparison between South Korean and Philippine economy.
Right.
Again, for everyone who's watching, feel free to drop in your questions on the comment section anytime during the lectures, and we will be answering those during the Q&A portion later on. Now, moving on to our next keynote speaker, he is a professor at the School of Global Studies in Kyongsong University. He is also a subject matter expert and adjunct lecturer at the International Federation of Professional Managers in London and TPM Asia, as well as visiting professor of business in the University of St. Louis Tuguegarao. His research interests revolve around issues and trends in international business and ASEAN Korea. He is the founding and the current president of the Council of ASEAN Professors in Korea through the ASEAN Korea Center. He was educated in Asia, Europe, and North America. He was conferred a distinction and credential from the Advanced Project Management Program of Stanford University and received his PhD from Hanyang University, which made him the first Filipino to have received an advanced degree in Korean studies, executive MBA from Aalto University, Helsinki, School of Economics in Finland, School of Public Policy and Management, and Bachelor from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He was a recipient of numerous grants and recognitions, including Korea Foundation, Global Ambassador Fellowship, and One Asia Club. He has been involved in multinational companies in different capacities in a wide array of industries such as IT in Israel, oil in Korea, education in the Philippines, banking in Korea, and startups in Hong Kong. He worked for non-governmental organizations and accomplished several Korean government projects, such as from the Ministry of Education and Korea Occupational Safety and Health Agency. Let's all welcome Dr. Joeffrey Calimag to talk about the emergence of Korean wave byproducts and services in the Philippines. Hi, sir. Excuse me, you are on mute. You are on mute po. You don't have an audio po, sir. You don't have an audio po. And wala pa rin pong audio, sir. Sorry, there's no audio po.
What about now? Can you
Ayan.
can you hear
Now, sir, we can hear you now.
you can hear me now? So the things I have said a while ago, the things I have said earlier, you did not hear that, right? Okay. Anyhow, as I've said, thank you so much for inviting me to this very timely um, webinar. And I just had another webinar just a few minutes ago. We had a consultation with the creation of Department of Filipino Overseas, something like manages welfare on overseas Filipinos. So we had a long discussion on that as well. Anyhow, so okay, so you are going to uh manage this one. I cannot manage this one. I cannot manage my own PPT, right? Because I made some changes in terms of the arrangement of my PPT. So if that's fine, can I have my own PPT? This one. Is it okay? Can you see my own PPT? Nope. You know, hello? Are you there?
Yes, sir, we can see your PPT a while ago.
You can see my PPT or no? Why is it
Y-
that
dr-
when I do
Now
my
y-
PPT?
you tried sharing it again, sir, because it. I think you removed the share of your PPT.
Okay. When I share this one, I cannot see myself. Mm. Anyhow, it's okay. Again, this is a topic, a light topic, and it's the almost end of the forum. And this is a very quite probably near to the young people's interest. But I hope I can explain a little bit of Hallyu and its byproducts, particularly in the Philippines. Okay, so are you familiar with these photos? This is, I'm sure you know, BTS. This is EXO, and this one is Twice, and this one is another girl group. I'm also sure that you know these Descendants of the Sun drama that it was very popular in the Philippines. This one, a lot of Filipinos got crazy with this. Um, what is the title of this one? This is uh, Cross Landing, all right, on You, Crash Landing on You. And this one is a movie that was that got a lot of awards in international film festivals. It's called Parasite. In Korea, there's a lot of film festivals. We have the Busan International Film Festival, which is the most popular. We have the Bucheon International Fantastic Film Festival. We have Jeonju International Film Festival. We also have Seoul International Women's Film Festival and also Ulsan Film Festival. Now, before we proceed to our main discussions about the merchandise, the byproducts, the goods and services that was related to the emergence of this Hallyu, let me give you an overview of Hallyu. What is Hallyu? Hallyu is a cultural export of Korea. I will not go into the traditional definition of Hallyu anymore because you know that Hallyu is about K-pop, Hallyu is about music, drama, and all that. But I'm going to give another angle uh, of Hallyu. As I have said, Hallyu is a cultural export of Korea. It's also a content, culture content. And it is an export entity extended on other Korean goods and services. Hallyu is also one of the largest exports of Korea that in 2019 it has gone up to more than 22.94%. Hallyu has developed into an industry of its own. And lastly, Hallyu is also defined as globalization. It has a lot of characteristics that we can compare it to globalization. Now, according to the report on 2019 economic effects of Hallyu that was released by Korea Foundation for International Cultural Exchange, Hallyu export or Hallyu related exports came to about 12.3 billion. As I've mentioned earlier, it went up to 22.4% from 2018. And in terms of the Korean content exports, this is how it grew exponentially from 2014 from 5.27 billion US dollars to become $10.36 billion dollars in 2019. When it comes to Hallyu, we're not only talking about we are not only looking at the Korean drama or the movies or the K-pop, but we have here, as you can see. Let me use my pointer here. My pointer. Okay, let me use the laser. Here we see that actually exports of cultural goods include the following: publishing, cartoons, music, games, movies, animation, broadcasting, advertising, characters, knowledge, information, content, content solutions. You see that games contribute a lot to this cultural content of Hallyu. Now, HRI, Hyundai Research Institute, predicted that BTS 10-year economic impact will reach 56.2 trillion. That's about $49.8 billion. And this number will easily surpass the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in 2018, which reached 41.6 trillion won. Also, Psy, very popular guy, that guy who have popularized the song Gangnam Style. He brought economic value of 1 trillion won, while Korean actor Bae Young Jun brought an economic value of around 9 or 3 million won via his lead role in the famous Korean drama Winter Sonata. And before, as I've said, I gave you the an overview of Hallyu, and what we're actually going to talk about today is the following. We're going to talk about a little bit of Korean economic history to give you a broader perspective on how it has shifted from being a devastated country to become one of the most powerful country that includes this cultural content. So first, we're going to talk about Korean economy, economic history. That's about 10 minutes out of 40 minutes that is given to me. And then pre-Hallyu, what happened before the Hallyu, and what's the future of Hallyu, how it had spread throughout the world, all over the world. And that's another 10 minutes. And lastly, this is the main uh, part of my talk, which is Hallyu and the Philippines and its byproducts. That's about 20 minutes. So I gave you the overview, and we're gonna have the discussion. And later at around 6:50, we're gonna have the open forum, and I'm expected to end around 7:20 Philippine time. All right. So the Korean economy post World War II was so bad. Korea was colonized by Japan in 1945. It was divided into the 38th parallel line of the Korean Peninsula in 1948. And then they experienced another war in 1953. 1945 was World War II. At the time, South Korea was one of the poorest, if not the poorest country in the world. It has a GDP per capita of $79. It's lower than most of the sub-Saharan countries. They depend on US aid, and their economy is largely an agricultural country. Also, the Korea lacks the natural resources such as coal, iron, copper, and oil. Look at this photo. This is Korea before. Can you imagine Korea to be like this? No. It is. This is near the city hall in Seoul. This is Cheonggyecheon. If you go to Cheonggyecheon now, it's very different. Why am I discussing this? Because I want you to look at the strategies, look at how Korea has gone into one of the poorest to become one of the biggest economies. In fact, it's the 10th largest economy now. I want you to emphasize, or I want you to look at this export-oriented development strategy that was started in the time of President Park Chung-hee. And they have emphasized at the time, there was an emphasis on industrial sector, rapid industrialization. They also have the 5-year plans and Samauluntong. This export-oriented has actually started long time ago, decades ago, 3 or 4 decades ago, which is still the strategy of Korea until present. And now the Korean economy is one of the powerhouse in Southeast Asia or in East Asia. It's one of the 4 Asian tigers. It's third largest economy in East Asia. It's now the 10th largest. Just the announcement a week ago or a few days ago, it is now the 10th largest economy in the world, despite the coronavirus, despite the pandemic. It's now the donor to international financial aid, a member of G20, and member of OECD. Is a report dated March 15. South Korea estimated to have ranked 10th in the 2020 global GDP rankings. Now, you are familiar with these brands, Hyundai, LG, and Samsung. It's very funny because every time I visit the Philippines, they say they call it Hyundai instead of Hyundai. Actually, the pronunciation is Hyundai. It's not Samsung, but Samsung. All right. Anyhow, this What happened pre Hallyu? Well, there's a district in Seoul called Itaewon. This is next to the U.S. base army. That was the birthplace of modern K-pop. And during the time, they have these what the key boys. It was the first boy band in Korea, and during that time, the theme or the genre was all about losing one's nation. It's about love of the country. It reflects sorrow. And after World War, Korean War, the presence of U.S. troops shifted to rock music because it's near the U.S. base. There is a shift to rock music. And during that time, it was the administration or government of Park Chung-hee, and there was a declaration of military control. So there is censorship. There's a lot of human rights violations, I must say. And rock bands were considered criminals, and musicians were banned from playing music. The government dictated what to be played and not to on radio. Sorry about that. Okay. And 1975 onwards, Shin Young-jun and his comrades or his companions pioneered a new hope for music, combining an imitation and reinterpretation that took jazz, soul, psychedelic rock, and folk songs. And a lot of musicians were banned and their albums were confiscated at the time. Also, in 1987, a democratic movement took place, so that gave freedom to everyone. In 1988, Korea hosted the 1988 Summer Olympics. That gave them this signified the new economic miracle of 20th century. It's also a time of generational and cultural changes. This gave confidence to Korea to be, some kind of uh, confidence to the world that we have hosted an international event. That's why look at us now. In 1990s, this is where the real changes took place in terms of the music. We had Solid Boys, which mostly trot. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's just like a Korean jazz thing, music. And So Tae-ji um, actually introduced kind of modern K-pop, hip hop fused with Korean music. And the youth were always looking for something new and fresh, so they continuously renovated or innovated their music. This Korean pop music is divided into before and after So Taeji. Now, here are the first idols. HOT, 1996. This is modeled after the New Kids on the Block. Sorry about this one. It's not New Kinds. It's New Kids on the Block. And Koreans at the time listened to US and UK pop songs, much to say that Koreans feel inferior. And before, being cute was not an important factor. HOT composed of good looking teenagers at this time. With the HOT, they tried to make the members, all the members, good looking. But before, it was not a significant factor. And this gave a preview of the future of K pop, which is the current K pop that we have now. Lee Soo-man of SM Entertainment undergone elite education in the music world and created HOT. At the time, idol concept did not exist yet, and the term idol has a negative meaning at the time, and this means weak, um, because it was like they are just there for the business and not really to have their own kind of creativity. Then 1997, we have SES. It's a girl group created by the SB Media, and then one time in 1998, they have the hip hop identity created by YG. Then 1999, we have God. Korea K-pop actually has that kind of mysterious thing. They want to remain mysterious, and that's the characteristic of K-pop. But then one thing happened is that a group, the God, went out of that mysterious kind of thing. And you know what happened? They have this baby diaries, because there was a show in Korea at the time that they will be filmed 24/7. They have to, all the members will take care a baby. And K-pop is for the main market is for teenagers, but because of that show, Even little kids now love K-pop, and also mothers, because it shows some affection of love and coming of care to a baby. So they have expanded their market, not only for teenagers, not only for the ladies, but also to not only to girls but also to little kids as well as mothers. Now, in early 2000, HOT went to China, and then they became a phenomenon. Even Chinese did not really understand the lyrics. They were surprised that Chinese could sing with them. And so the term Hallyu, or Korean wave, came into usage. And because of this, many Korean singers can now go overseas because of HOT's experience. 2001, Boa pioneered K-pop. He went to Japan. He studied Japanese for 1 month. He lived there by herself. She was very young. She worked hard to penetrate the Japanese market. At the time, we know that Koreans still feel inferior to Japanese J-pop, to Japanese technology, etc. Now, let's move to Hallyu and its byproducts. Was it accidental or carefully planned? Well, I must say, let me just give you a one incident. What happened with the HOT. HOT was the first one, the K-pop that they formed this group after the New Kids on the Block. They have the good-looking guys there, and they were actually their group actually um, showed an evidence of the first merchandise, the K-pop merchandise, when they have this candy kind of thing. Because of their popularity, a lot of puffy hats, mittens, stationery, pens, posters were out of the market. So it was not really kind of planned, but just came out um, as an offshoot or as a result of their popularity. Look at them. They didn't want to wear these costumes before, but they transform 180 degrees. The manager asked them, forced them to wear this one, and it became a hit. So this was the first evidence of K-pop merchandise. Now, how did this global spread of value happen? Well, there are four factors that I can identify. We have the government support, we have the global shift. Sorry about that. We have the government support, we have the business strategies, we have the global shift, and content and branding. Under the government support, I have mentioned these earlier. We have the exported economy, infrastructures that was supported by the government. They give incentives for those creators, then they support and they give resources. We also have strategies. When we say strategies, global strategies, restructuring of chaebols, there's sponsorships and sport events, commercial, social media. And then we also have public diplomacy in the global shift, global economy, technology was there, competitiveness, and there's a lot of people exchanges that happened. And very important is content and branding. They look into brand reputation, advocacies, campaigns, emotion, experience, and value. So government support. Um, I have mentioned these already, but what are these support? Look at these examples. The Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism supports the spread of value, and they even reorganized their ministry to create Hallyu Support and Cooperation Division. That was happened just last year during the pandemic. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also serves an important element of Korea's public diplomacy in terms of infrastructure, in terms of supporting the was that the support, gymnasium, etc. There is a project to be built, a 42,000 seat concert arena in Goyang, just north of Seoul. And this will be completed in 2023, in 2 years. The Korea Culture and Tourism Institute, or KCTI, also has did is doing a lot of uh, a lot of projects to promote Hallyu. KCTI is a think tank affiliated with the Culture Ministry, and they will build this. They will construct Hallyu big data center that will elevate the cultural industry to higher ground by helping policymakers and industry executives utilize its vast data. Also, you can see here in the paper by Song Ho Kwan and Joseph Kim, they said that the rapid development of other industries also facilitated the enhanced competitiveness of Korean cultural products in global markets. And so, as a result, Korea's cultural industries made substantial inroads into East Asian markets in the late 1990s and into global markets in the 2000s, 2000s rather. Now, what are the support from this KCTI? They have these policies, diversifying Hallyu content, insert and culture competitive Hallyu content, expand the base of Hallyu into overall Korean culture, enhance online services in the changing economic environment. Another policy, a major policy, is leading relevant industries growth through a Hallyu. And let me emphasize this, support industrial marketing for Hallyu related products, grow the service industry in connection with Hallyu, enhance the marketing potential or cooperation between Hallyu and industries, and establishing the foundation for the sustainable spread of Hallyu. Now, in terms of business strategies, we have the following. Many of these sectors, meaning the different players and the different stakeholders involved in Hallyu, are combined within a single production through product placement and endorsement, and they are part of a new phase of economic development that emphasizes the role of intellectual property and creativity in the production process, and therefore these decouple the cost of production and retail price, and these also thereby promoted tourism and consumption of other Korean products. They also utilize the social media, especially Twitter. Okay, with Twitter, they have what they were able to reach out more K-pop fans using Twitter, including the Philippines. Now, global shift, we have the following, but I'm just going to give you some examples or some details of those five that I have mentioned. The favorable image of Korea, usually represented by high level of industrialization and economy, is more likely to be enhanced by favorable image of product and Korean cultural wave. This is a paper by Fandi Zainas Tijo and Kim Kyung-tae. Very important is the branding. Okay, we have the branding here that includes the following, and reputation is very important. This is not, I'm not sure if this is clear to you. It's written in Korean, but these names here are the names of the boy bands. And they are using these as a kind of an index or a some kind of monitor that look at the popularity of boy bands. We have here the BTS to be very, very popular. And this is from the Korea Enterprise Research Institute. This is very new. This is April 2021 data, just this month. What is this saying? It means that they are using this brand reputation index to look at you. They use them to be part of marketing. They use these boy bands to be part of branding of another Korean product. You will see later what products these are. We have Korean Air, we have Hyundai, we have Soju, we have Ramyun, and they use all these boy bands to promote. Not only Hallyu in itself is a product, and without Hallyu, with the help of Hallyu, it is expanding to other Korean products, which is, we can see this a lot in the Philippines as well. Outside music, they use their global popularity to launch the Love Myself. This is also very important in when they do branding. They talk about advocacies. They talk about loving yourself, to be yourself, fighting against violence. They talk about your emotions, belongingness, and this is one of the things that Korea is really good at. And they match that with the marketing strategies that they have. Also, when they do brand, they break barriers. because they transcend to all the peoples of the world. There's an emotional connection to fans despite the language barrier. Well-known global companies develop marketing campaigns that don't necessarily just sell their product or service. Their commercials tell a story that everyone can connect to, often with just an emotional narrative about an important issue about the broader human experience. And similarly, K-pop doesn't just sell music, but a full experience that anyone can connect to. Next one is genre defying. They experiment and they try to mix everything in one song. In one song, you can hear a jazz feel. In one song, you can hear rap or hip hop and a ballad. So they defy genre. They mix genres and they try to be a melting pot of genre, um, that new listeners or that facilitates new listeners to listen to it across the world. A brand identity should feel authentic to the consumer. In music, listeners are drawn to genres they are authentically express emotion or narratives. In K-pop, especially, the mixing of genres and styles in is natural and feels authentic to listeners. This is one of uh, um, the things that I got from Cultural Chameleon. Also, aesthetics, aesthetics rather. You have fashion, style, makeup. Some of my friends are really into skincare. Oh my God, they come here and their luggage when they go back. Oh, when they come to Korea, their luggage is empty. It's really huge luggage. And then when they go back to the Philippines, it's full of mask, not the face mask that we are using for the pandemic, but what do they call that, the mask for skincare, lotion, toners, and all that, because they have this how many steps of skincare. We also have the hairstyle thing. People try to imitate the hairstyles, and so they go to a Korean hair salon, and of course makeup. And as I've said, there is a cohesive and creative campaigning. Branding a product or company entails creating the ultimate experience for the consumer. It's not just unveiling the product on a specific date, it's creating a social media frenzy, hashtags, and all leading up to the release of the product. And a great campaign catches our attention and establishes the band's brand from one song or music video. You'll notice that each band is cheered on by audience with their own chant, and audiences wave around special light sticks. When it comes to contents and themes, the Korean drama. If you watch Korean drama, maybe Kim Song Dok, they have this cooking thing, culinary, and fans imitate Korean dishes, food, mostly seen in K dramas. And they also in K dramas, you see a lot of products in there. You see the soju there, you see the ramyun, you see the phones, the cars, and the beautiful destinations of Korea that really it's inviting. It's kind of attracting the audience, or the watchers, to try and go to Korea. Now, this is very important. From K-pop to K-pop, what does it mean? Well, before we thought that K-pop is K stands for Korea, right? But actually, there are papers that says that K is not actually Korea. If you look at the K-pop music that we have, it has nothing to do with the Korean traditional culture. So K actually is a brand. It's not the K as it stands for Korea. All right. So it's from K-pop, shifting from K-pop to become a brand. That's why. What is this brand? There's a lot of things to discuss about the Korean brand. Now, branding and marketing mix. We have they do have the website, logo, official color, light stick, fandom, and when talking about fandom, we have the following: Army. I think very popular. It's the fans group of BTS. Of Blinks, fans of the group Blackpink. There's also Showell, but Shiny. Now, from the paper of the effect of Hallyu on tourism in Korea, we have by Bae and his co-authors. It can be seen that the Korean wave is one of the important factors for attracting foreign tourists to Korea in four countries. Four countries: U.S., Japan, China, Hong Kong. And another paper says there is a link between international trade in tangible consumption goods and services and intangible cultural goods. The Hallyu exports have a positive effect on consumer good exports, and inbound visitor flows in general. So we see that there's actually a link between these Hallyu to the goods and services. On December 2018, the Hyundai Research Institute also revealed that BTS is responsible for contributing $1.1 billion. And according to the latest report, BTS has an effect on the following consumer goods: clothing, about $2 billion, cosmetics, $2.8 billion, and food, $3.96 billion. When did this BTS start? Just recent, just a few years ago. But look at how much they have brought economic value to Korea. In the car industry, BTS are currently the global ambassadors of Hyundai Motors. Oh, we can see that in the commercial later. The SUV Palisade. According to SM2 Networks, Hyundai Motor received 600 billion won in promotional results from the collaboration with the group, proving the power of BTS effects. So Hallyu is very powerful to promote not only Hallyu, the product in itself, but other related Hallyu products. Now, another paper that we have here, that there is an effect, the effect of the variables, meaning to say the variables they used here, mm, uh, is the variables is not uniform, but most importantly, the most important message here is that Hallyu cannot be ignored because it has an effect. It has an effect on the tourist arrivals in Korea. Another one is the impact of Hallyu 4.0 and social media in Korean products purchase decision of Generation C in Vietnam. They have proven that there is actually a relationship between Korean drama and their purchase behavior. Now, this is a video. I hope I can play this one. Mhm. Can I share this one? Can I play this one? Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay. All right. So this is the Hyundai BTS. I hope you can see this one.
This is worldwide awesome. A small travel for a better future. Feel it in the air. Feel it in our moves. Sing it out loud. Sing it out proud.
Let me just give you some insights about this one. What are the words they use? Sing it out loud, you know, positive energy. These are the things that people want to hear, especially in pandemic. You know, they have the product, the good product. They also try to connect with you. The meaning of this one. Now, listen and create your own. It's about empowering yourself. There's a lot of things happening, and you see all these people, they have different faces. What are they saying? That they are all encompassing. They are embracing different cultures. Okay? We have the black people, the Arabs, we have the Caucasians, we have the Asians. They want to be kind of yeah. They want the message is very strong that they are promoting. Oh, what is this? What happened? They're promoting love. They're promoting a connection. All right. Next one. This one is Korean Air. I'm not gonna play that anymore. Another one we have a soju. I think let's try to watch this one together. Soju. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this one, but I assume that you know this. There's a huge consumption of soju lately in Vietnam, also in the Philippines, I think. Right. She is also part of Hallyu. She is very popular. And now, she's also a very powerful what model for soju. This one is Galaxy A. Notice their language, notice their action. Hmm? See? Again, there are many faces that we can see here. There are many faces from all over the world. Nature you can see here. And then the message of the song in itself is very powerful. Okay, and it targets the generation, the young people who are actually the fans. You see? All right, enough of that. So that is how Hallyu has spread globally, all over the world. What about in the Philippines? Look at this. This is a map. Okay, this is Korea, and this is the green one is the Philippines. Most of the imports of the Philippines from South Korea include the following. See, electrical, electronic, mineral fuels, machinery, vehicles, plastics, vehicles other than railway and tramway, miscellaneous chemical products, iron and steel, copper, organic chemicals, optical. I want to have a data that specifically for the imports of goods and probably services from Korea. And that is a room for data collection. And here we have how do Filipinos accept Koreans or the Hallyu in itself? And we see here that based on this study that they use FGI, okay, focus group discussion. Each group shows the differences of cognitions, attitudes, and actions to consume Hallyu, and the participants of both groups agrees that experiences of contacting Koreans influence on understanding Korea and its culture. Okay, so it's double-sided, double purpose. So I consume Korean products, and now I understand Korea. I understand Korean people. I understand their culture. Hallyu needs to promote its values as the unique culture and also universal culture in the world, and Korea should increase understanding. On the other side, understanding of the Filipino culture to overcome cultural differences and make efforts on localizing the Hallyu 3.0 in the Philippines. Another one by Magno. It says the cultural phenomenon that is revolutionizing the world today, which became a mystery to the eyes of the most Filipinos. Now it expounds the deeper root of Hallyu, staying power in the Philippines, as well as the challenges it possesses through the concepts of cultural imperialism, as explained by Joseph Niel's soft power and Filipino sense of cultural identity. So here we have a very interesting information here. According to the Korea Foundation report, the Philippines has the biggest growth rate in the number of Hallyu or Korean Wave clubs, fan clubs, and members in Southeast Asia in 2018. When we talk about fan clubs, this includes fan clubs for Korean singers, actors, culture, food, taekwondo clubs, and Korean culture clubs in universities. The number of Hallyu fans reached 89.9 million in 113 countries, including the Philippines. In the Philippines, the number of clubs grew 394 times. And then the number of Hallyu fans in the Philippines is at 996,000, almost 1 million. Okay, can you imagine that these 1 million Filipinos buy at least one product of Korea? That is already equivalent to 1 million, isn't it? And this adds the K-pop consumption that is remarkably high in Southeast Asia. The Philippine K-pop Convention Committee cited has 79 fan clubs under its wing, and with a total of 293,000 members. Another one, a lot of K-pop groups have visited the Philippines. You have watched a lot of Korean novellas already. There's about more than 300 Korean dramas. We call that locally Korean novellas. We have GMA, we have ABS-CBN, we have TV5. If you Google the list of these dramas that are shown in Philippine television or in the local channels, you see there's a lot. I was very surprised when I found out that there's a lot of these dramas, more than 300 Korean dramas since 2000, early 2000. And also, the storylines of Korean dramas appeal to Filipinos as these are mostly family oriented and depict people overcoming adversity. And it said it has gained popularity among low income and middle class families. They could really relate to this one. Korean films, Parasite. Korean films are regularly shown in the country through film festivals, including the Korean Film Festival established by the Korean Cultural Center in the Philippines. Also, we have the Train to Busan. I'm from Busan, so if you come to Korea, please let me know. Korean food is also there. It has gained popularity in the Philippines. There's a growth of Korean restaurants and Korean restaurant franchises, and there also interest in Korean language class. What else? Korean fashion. Among Filipino youth, there is a high interest in Korean fashion and cosmetics. I got this from a material in the internet from Interaction. They like the question was why do you like Korea, or why do you like Hallyu, Korean wave, or K drama in particular? Because they said it's relatable. The music is upbeat, and Korean products and food fans adapt to buy what their idols use or consume. And Filipinos are smart shoppers because now there is one branch of no brand which is can be found in Robinson's Galleria in Ortigas. So that's the reason why they have that, or why they like Hallyu. Also, this is related to the K dramas. Let me just get some of the quotes from these TV stations. According to Jose Marie Joey Abacan of GMA, she said that Filipinos love Korean dramas because they can relate to the stories, stating that the Filipino state becomes very discriminating. So we tend to ask more of this novel experience. And according to Evelyn Lang Mundo of ABS-CBN, she said that Korean dramas offer Filipino audiences a change of pace from local programming, and Korean novellas give viewers different style of storytelling from usual Filipino soap operas. She stated that Korean novellas are a perfect complement to our Filipino soaps, and viewers find them refreshing. As again, you can see the list here. This is not an official one, but just to give you an idea of what how many Korean dramas were shown already in the Philippines. Uh, Also, there's a lot of people exchange. Many Filipinos go to Korea to travel, and the number one tourists of the Philippines are Koreans. Now, to end my presentation, let me ask you this: who is the market for Korean or for the Hallyu byproducts? So we saw that Hallyu in itself has a market. We see um, we see this Korean music being played on radio, Korean music played in parties. We watch Korean dramas. These big TV stations, they pay a lot for these to get the permit to be shown in local TV television. So there's a market for Hallyu. But what about the byproducts of Hallyu around that, like soju, samgyeopsal? We see that we have consumer products such as what we see in the K drama, liquor. We have samgyeopsal. We have ramyun. Even I saw a lot of Filipinos also doing the challenge. They're eating the very spicy chicken, and then not only that, there's a very popular chicken brand. It's just chicken, fried chicken, but they say it's Korean chicken. So it's just a spice. It's not really an original Korean chicken, but it's just made it popularized by idols, popularized by these groups. And services, people go to salons, even if it's more expensive to go to Korean hairs stylist. And there's a lot of saunas also now in the Philippines. But who is their market for these? And another kind of product, byproduct, we have the cars, we have the home appliances. So we have to look at uh, we have to categorize the market into who can actually are consumers, or who are the users of these, or buyers of these goods and services. And this is a room for research. So at the moment, I have not seen a data that would say a clear or an exact, or maybe a data that would say how much byproducts, Korean Hallyu related byproducts that Filipinos consume. Have you bought any Korean goods or services? Please tell me in the comment section. Now, here, uh, there's a paper written by my friend, by Eric Capistrano. He looked at the disparities in the no, actually the behavior, okay, how you incorporate performance, and he found notable gaps that are the disparities in the target market's buying behaviors and purchasing power vis-a-vis the company's product and promotion strategies. And this gives us insight that actually there are users and buyers of the Korean products, but which particular market are we targeting all these? But for those fans, hardcore fans, they really buy the brands or the merchandise of the group, and they also buy those promoted the products that are being promoted, advertised by this group. But what about those not hardcore fans of this Hallyu? And we see here the consumer products. I mentioned this earlier. We have Korean restaurants, samgyeopsal, cosmetics. We have 10 Step now, Regimen Face Care. We have Kmart. In Kmart, what do you find? What do you see in Kmart? We have gochujang, the chili paste. We have the noodles, Korean ramyun, etc., etc. We also have bakeries there in the Philippines. Now, the services, we have the PC Bang game room that is really for, I'm not sure if you have gone into the PC Bang, but it's a game, it's a place where you can play games, online games. There's saunas and hair salons there. And the industrial and electronics, we have cars, phones, computer, laptops, and home appliances. My point here is there is a particular market for each of these: consumer products, services, and industrial electronics. Now, I would like to end my presentation here. This is my contact information. If you need more information, let me know. But now I'm gonna open the floor for your questions. I
Thank you,
heard it
Dr.
really.
Kali. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Kalimag, for that very interesting talk. Actually, as an active consumer of the Hallyu byproduct, it's very interesting that we learned about the Korea's economy is pre-Hallyu and how the beginning of Hallyu spread globally through business strategies, content, and branding, and how big Korea byproduct consumption here in the Philippines. Now we will proceed to our open forum, so any of the speakers can answer the questions. So I will be reading the questions first, but it will also be flashed on the screen. So for our first question, so it says here, as Western developed nations push through vaccinations, what would be the repercussions on global recovery of this vaccination divide as the rest of the world remains in want of vaccines? I think this question goes to Dr. Pyo.
Yes. Again, I want to remind you of a recent remark by United States. They were making sure that they have enough vaccination. before ending of this year. In other words, they may need third dosage in addition to two dosage they have applied, just to make sure that everyone gets vaccinated effectively. They may need a third application of the dosage. So that means they want to have more extra kind of cushion. And that's the reply South Korean authority got from United States. In other words, saying that U.S. is saying that we cannot afford offering additional vaccination at this point because we are ourselves in short of vaccination dosage. So that means global effort is failing, to get the global sort of vaccination. And right now, according to recently released news, uh, Soviet Union's new vaccination, I think it's like a Sputnik Light or something like that. Uh, they claim that it is has been tested and it is good enough. So maybe a lot of third world countries, non-European countries, may have to get from Soviet Union or even from China, for vaccination dosage because globally it is in shortage right now. Any
Okay,
other
thank you
question?
for that, Dr. Pio.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Pio. So I hope, Carlos, we answered that question. Okay, so for our next question,
Hmm.
so this question goes to Dr. Kalimag. So it says,
Hmm.
how long do you think would be the economic effects of Hallyu last in here in the Philippines?
You know, I have asked the same question before. First of all, hello, Dr. Kipio.
Hmm. Hi, how are you?
I found your your presentation so deep and also a lot of things there, and
Hmm.
you provided information that it branched out to a lot of information. Anyhow,
Hmm.
going back to the question, how long does it last here in the Philippines? Well, I'm looking at the cultural aspect, cultural dimensions of Filipinos. Before Korean novellas, we have the Mexican themed dramas, and it changed. Our taste has changed, and also Filipinos are really early adopters in many ways. But I think the familiarity, the distance, and also the good image that Korea is giving to the Philippines will make it sustainable for for a longer time, and it will not go away for like the 10 years, especially that the Korean government is doing its best to promote Hallyu. You expect that there will be a lot of innovations. Do you expect that there will be a lot of different contents, different strategies, different things that you can see, and maybe it will also evolve into a more hybrid, more experiential Hallyu, so it will not go away. And I would say because Korea has installed the infrastructure, the support, the government. There's also one thing that the issue in the government though, they because of this intervention of the government with the Hallyu, some people, some experts think that okay, if there's a regulation from the government, it might be some kind of impeding our creativity, or maybe some if because of the regulation, it will not express the things that they want to show to the world. And there are laws that were being shut down or being open up, for example, privacy, etc. Now, with all these cultural background of Filipinos, where they, especially now with the internet, we can access easily the contents. Number two, we the young generation always asks for more. And who is the competitor of Korea? We have to ask that. Are we competing with the American Hollywood? Are we competing with the Mexican? No, there is no competitor for Korea that can actually um, provide or that can actually offer them their demands of entertainment or some kind of that's relatable. If you can give me an alternative to Korea or to Hallyu, and that I think that will trigger the popularity of Korea, Hallyu, Korean wave, then I think that will be a start of asking the question. But for now, I don't see any competitor yet. So it will be there. Even for the local, even if we say that we are Filipino, so we can actually relate to our own. But there's a lot of adaptations from Korean shows, even the musical shows, even the dramas, the music. They translate the Korean song into Filipino. We have the I Can Sing. Those they are franchise of many Korean shows that were brought to the Philippines. So I don't see the downturn of Hallyu in the Philippines. Maybe in the next 10 years. So who knows? Thank you for that,
Thank you
Erica.
for that. Thank you for that, Dr. Kalimag. I actually agree with that. Since as a fan for almost 10 years, I can see how Korea really advanced their marketing here in the Philippines.
It
Now for
adapts at the same time, isn't
yes,
it? Um
yes,
it's very competitive, really.
yes, that's true. So for our next question is for the both speakers. Okay, so it says here, how is this miracle industrial Hallyu economic development of South Korea reflected on other parts of the world? Are there influences on post-reform China and Southeast Asia? Also, are there antecedents from US or Japan? So any from the speakers can answer.
Miracle industry. Yeah. Dr. Pio,
Hmm.
I'm gonna give a little bit of my insights.
Right.
Okay. So, first of all, the transformation or the development of the economy of Korea in itself is a miracle. They call that the Han River miracle. It's not
Mm.
actually a miracle in the Han River, but they just call that divides the north and the south of Seoul. And the miracle in Korea is happening again and again and again. That's my observation. Even in 1997, there was really a massive closure or shutdown of companies there, but they were able to rise up again, you know.
Hmm.
And now with the brands, the televisions that we see in our houses, in our homes,
Hmm.
Sony, we have the Toyota cars, and now what we have, LG. Most of the televisions that I see in homes, wherever I visit my friend's home, whether in the Philippines or in the US or everywhere, I see Samsung or LG.
Right.
Okay, it's a miracle in just
Hmm.
a short span. And they listen. I think the Koreans listen. Before, when I was young, I'm already old, by the way. When I was younger, Kia Pride was a no-no. You know, my friends were very shy. They don't want to go out with friends with the Kia Pride. You know, the box type. You know,
Hmm.
friends are driving Toyota or Mercedes Benz, and then he has a Pride. What now? You see, the market share of Hyundai in the U.S. has surpassed. I mean, it's number one with the SUV as well as uh, the 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 consumer cars. So anyhow, this this miracle in Hallyu in terms of economic
Hmm.
development of South Korea is reflected in many parts of the world, whether in
Hmm.
public diplomacy, whether in sports, whether in language, whether in you name it. And that because of Hallyu, that gave a lot of more rooms for Korea to expand its influence. Look at Korea. What is the population of Korea? Of 55 million, 57. But they have the one of the biggest economies in the world. Why? Because they went global. And that's where they got the market. And if they concentrate in the local market, they could not sell enough So their strategy of going outward, their strategy of export-led, government-led, is actually a manifestation that has reflected on other parts of the world. You visit a country and you see large billboards of Samsung. You see a country that they don't know anything that they know about Samsung. Do you know any country that they don't know Samsung? I don't think so. Do you know any country that they don't know Sai? No. By just merely thinking, this is Korea, Samsung is Korea, Sai is Korea. But before, when they look at us, but when they look at or China, when they look at Koreans, the first thing that comes into their mind is, you are Chinese. But now they can easily distinguish, this is Korean, because there's already a clear demarcation or clear distinct. We distinguish Koreans from Chinese, and that also is a pride for Korea to show that we are small, but we are invading the world. We may not be strong militarily, but we are invading in other ways, and that is a reflection to the other parts. Now, the second question here: are there influences on post-reform China? Yes, of course. Even if we have this what do you call that? Confucianism, the Confucianism that we have in Korea, there's no equality there, but because of the spread of Korea, they have learned a lot from outside world. Economically they have grown, economically they have developed, but socially, before Korea, I must say, I have lived in Korea for about 20 years. It was kind of awkward, but it is coping socially. They have grown so fast economically, but when I first arrived here, it was like so close, very, you cannot penetrate, you cannot integrate yourself to the Korean society. But there's a lot of efforts. By going outside, they were able to learn a lot of things, the standardization, harmonizing and going to the standards of other countries. That's where they, influence that actually they got, and at the same time they gave to the world. And there are other antecedents from US, Japan. Yes, Korea is the only place in the world where there is still a conflict. North Korea and South Korea. It's a very small country, North and South Korea. But why is it that the countries around the world, big countries around the world, is putting a lot of energy, time, effort to talk about South Korea? Because it is significant.
Okay, well, let me get back to the original question that we are talking about economic progress, economic development in South Korea, together with cultural sort of Hallyu syndrome, which are spreading to Southeast Asia, and even right now to Europe and all these things. Of course, two phenomena, economic progress and Hallyu syndrome, are supplementary. It comes together usually. But if you look at very carefully, two phenomena is of course interrelated, but the origin of the two phenomena rests on two different things. Economic progress, the reason why some of the conglomerates in Korea has sort of outpaced, has been miraculously successful, is because in comparison with Japanese, Chaibatsu, like conglomerates, Sony and Toshiba and all those brands, I think Korean firms try to line up with global partners more aggressively. In other words, I will tell you, this is one of the fun topics that I discuss in class. That is, this mobile phone. When Korea adopted this mobile phone technology, there were two competing technology. One from Ericsson type European technology, The other from Qualcomm, commercialized kind of basically military communication device. And Korea tried to adopt both because Korea had to sell their cell phone not only to the United States but also to the European market. So Korea did not have any option except adopting two standards, European standards and Qualcomm dominating American standard. In case of Japanese firms, they try to protect their own protocol, their own native system, because Japanese market was big enough so that they could afford protecting their sort of platform in their devices. So ultimately, who is winning the telephone, the mobile phone market? Korean firms were winning over Japanese models because it is very liberal, open system. Any protocol, any subscriber could get into buy this machine. So in other words, what I'm trying to illustrate, what kind of implication it has for Philippines. The best way economically for the Philippines is very much outward oriented. In other words, strategy. Philippines should be able to open everything and should be able to export anything. That's the best strategy to open up. Education too. Send your children, your students abroad if possible. And also try to, adopt a lot of foreign technology and education. That's the key. Hallyu is just offspring. Hallyu, one thing is, Hallyu has intense domestic competition. It is the byproduct of domestic competition. Hallyu, if you look at the center of BTS, for example, BTS was just one of those, K-pop singer groups, right? BTS was not alone. And BTS were not even first rater in domestic competition. So that's why they avoided domestic competition. They went out to test themselves. So in other words, the very nature of Hallyu, at the core of Hallyu, you will see very intense competition. That competition makes the product sellable, the product spreadable, right? So in other words, Korea's drama market, many dramas, within 2 or 3 sessions, they disappear. They stop it. If the rating is not good, broadcasting firm stops the drama. So all the surviving drama cannot be failure. In other words, Hallyu may not have intense competition from outside, but in itself, within the system, it is very serious competition there is. That makes some Hallyu product sellable, popular, particularly popular in Southeast Asia, because our common thread of cultural heritage are the same. Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, not much different from Korea. So we share kind of sympathy and family-oriented education and respect for the elderly. These kind of Confucianist kind of tradition is there. So that's why Hallyu makes successful to some extent. And if you look at very carefully Hallyu is not global cultural affair. It is very Korean native affair. So in other words, we appreciate Filipino culture if that culture is really traditional Filipino culture. We appreciate Filipino culture. We don't want Philippine from Philippines something like American culture or Spanish culture. Genuine Philippine culture, right? The same is true with the Hallyu. There has to be some very native Korean native element, then makes still Hallyu competitive and successful. That's my judgment. Okay? Thank you for your question.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Bill.
Can I
Mm,
add?
Okay.
I totally agree with Dr. Pio because there was this girl group that went to America and they tried to translate their songs into English. It was a flop. It did not become
right.
successful, you know. And so they realized that that's the beauty of the K-pop music to become
Mm,
more authentic. That's what they want, and they could not really understand, but still they were able to follow that because it's the tempo, it's the connection, as I've said. And apart from that, the question was about the antecedents. I forgot to tell you. It's just my opinion as a non-Korean looking at Korea. Korea has been devastated or been colonized. So Korea feels like it's surrounded by countries. Korea wants to get out from that. So they want to be more than Japan all the time. Or maybe the benchmark is to surpass that. That kind of, they used to have the inferiority complex, but
yeah,
because
that's
of
true.
that
Right.
competition, that,
Mm,
we want to be more than our neighbors.
right.
China is very big country, and Japan is our, historically, they did a lot of bad things to us. So that is an antecedent probably that made the burning some passion for Korea to improve. That's why they have the competition in itself has many levels: competition inside the market and competition with the neighboring countries, and that is an antecedent why it became so very popular. And then education, I really totally agree with Professor Dr. Pio. Education is also very important. And uh yeah, there is a lot of things that you can see inside Korea that made them push themselves to the limit. I have a lot of stories I have in my accounts that says parents in Korea sacrifice their food just to send their kids to school. And that's something. Korea is an education centric country. And well, there's a lot of funny stories, but that's reserved for other time. For example, when they take the college entrance exam, it's
Right.
very funny because they had the sunum. If you are an outsider, you cannot really understand why this is so important to them. Anyhow, you can see a lot. It's a business, the hagwons, the academies, English, math, all of that, sports, music. That is an antecedent. I think they want to be more than their neighbors.
And one thing to be noted, the Hyundai cars are designed not by Koreans.
Yes,
Top designer
top
outsourced
designers.
from Italy, France, anywhere. They pay high salary and they pay off. Their work is paying off.
That's
Samsung
true.
also trying to recruit best talent in artificial intelligence anywhere. They pour millions of dollars to those to hunt those talents. So Korean firms are not Korean firms unless
Global.
they get globalized firms. Why Latin American, why Filipino would buy Korean television set over Sony, who are traditionally very famous brands because the quality per dollar they spend is supporting their purchase to some extent, guaranteeing, it's kind of occupied market to some extent. So again, that still has but South Korea has still a lot of challenges domestically because of kind of populist syndrome. Our economy has been sort of slowing down, and Korea is not heaven. Korea cannot continue forever miracle. We cannot have a miracle forever. Any nation is entering into convergent stage, which means slowing down. We have aging issue. We have a younger generation which cannot really support welfare of the elderly, things like that. But I think Korea has a hope. One hope is at some point to be economically integrated with North Korea. Then Manchuria, Siberia, all those far eastern northern area can be redeveloped. And there is a potential. And the Philippines will also be able to participate in developing North Korea and also Manchuria area and the eastern part of Russia. These are huge places waiting for next generation to be developed. So we are not that pessimistic. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that very detailed answer to the question. So for our last question, it's also a question for the both of our speakers. So it says here, much of the world has been following Hollywood for entertainment for decades now. How do you think will be the rise of Hallyu affect people's consumption of American entertainment products? Can we even try to pit one against the other? Increase in Hallyu consumption will affect the consumption of Hollywood products, or are their growth rates unrelated to each other?
Well, my judgment is Hollywood will remain as Hollywood because there are simply just too much talents accumulated in Hollywood. Variation. Hollywood is a kind of, the way I see it, is a kind of Hollywood variation. This variation comes off and on from other countries, from European countries, from Latin American countries, from Middle East, from India, from South Korea. But I don't think that can overtake the mainstream of Hollywood. The Hollywood is by just sheer accumulation of wealth and the talents. For example, even China new power, global power, cannot take away Hollywood. Hollywood is Hollywood. There's centuries accumulation of wealth and talents. Of course, Korean syndrome, such as Hallyu, could be a minor variation, but cannot overtake mainstream of Hallyu. Okay? For that purpose, Hallyu is still too fragmented market. Far Eastern Asian market only is not really global feature, right? So my prediction is Hollywood will remain as Hollywood. Hallyu will be an offspring, variation. Could be a supplementary to Hollywood culture.
Well, actually, I would say that Hallyu will remain as is, and it has its own market, and
Mm,
it's a new one. Hollywood
right.
has been there for many years, but look at
Exactly.
what we have achieved so far. From
Mm,
time to time, there is some kind of a big achievement. Look at Psy, 1 billion, more than 1 billion, and then we thought it will bug down, right? We thought, it will not be followed by what's next for Psy. There were a lot of
mm,
questions at the time. Will it sustain? Then we have BTS, and then the next question is who will be the next. And this competition, if you just know how much the sacrifices of these idols, if you know becoming an idol is not easy. You have to sacrifice 5 years of your life
right.
to become an idol,
Mhm.
and very competitive. Hallyu is not just K-drama, it's not just uh K-pop. There's a lot of content, cultural contents. And if we can see from the statistics that I have shown you earlier, the games that's made from Korea is there. The games is huge market for Korea, and it will not
That's right.
go away. And
Right.
we are now with the Olympics of online games, it's becoming more popular, and we are inviting a lot of people to participate in that Olympics. At first I could not understand that Olympics of games, that online games, that strategy games. But now I'm starting to, look at it as, oh my God, this is a huge market. It's not just Korean drama. And
Right.
other K dramas, K beauty, K theater, the concerts, and then there's a lot of K that is associated, and that is waiting to be what developed. The K-pop is matured and it's continuing and developing, continues to develop. We have the K-drama, but there are other Ks in our Hallyu that is waiting to ripen, and you will be surprised that we have a lot of what is it called that Korea experimented too, that most of the opera that we have are from Italy. They speak the Italian language, they speak the Russian and also the French in opera. But just a few weeks ago, they had this opera, this theater in Korean language, and it sounds good actually. I think that is something that probably will again another market, another Hallyu that will be welcomed by other, because Hallyu for K-pop is for the teenagers, we know that. But how about those who are a little bit older? How about those a little bit elite who are into this classic? That's their market, and they have more purchasing power. See, so there is something there. K-pop is in not only the things that we see now. So and also I agree that maybe they can supplement with the Hollywood. They can complement each other, especially for those who are not English speakers. They do when you watch a drama Hollywood. If you are Vietnamese that don't speak English, for example, you still need the subtitle, and you're not familiar with their culture, but you are familiar with Korean, and there's a lot of influence of Korea. It will not. I don't think it will not pit against each other. It will actually go together. And in fact, probably it will. The first K-pop, the HOT, is modeled after New Kids on the Block, and they learn. That's a good thing about Korea. They do learn. They do get talents from other countries, and that's how they develop their industry. The design of Hyundai is from very good designers from abroad, and the model for the HOT is from also Hollywood. It will
Right.
become, you expect things to happen. We don't know, but same with Dr. Pio, it will remain as is. Mm.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Actually, Dr. Kalimag, when you mentioned like the spread of the Olympics of online games, it reminded me how this Korean esports team actually collaborated with this one member of EXO, and like the international fans of this of EXO is who are not into esports started searching up about esports. So I guess that's also one of the
Right.
good strategies
Mm,
that I found interesting. So
Korean is
now,
also
thank you. Yeah,
redefining. Korean
yeah.
is
yep.
redefining sports. We are not only physical but also strategy. Anyhow, sorry for the interruption.
Okay. So thank you
Okay.
everyone for all the questions. There were a lot of engaging and insightful questions, and we hope the speakers were able to answer those. And apologies to those questions that aren't brought up due to our time restrictions, and also thank you to our speakers. And before we end today's program, UP Ariang would like to present our certificate of appreciation to Dr. Hak K and Dr. Joeffrey Calimag. First, for
Thank
Dr.
you very
Hak
much.
K, we
Yep.
would like to
Thank you.
present this certificate of appreciation for imparting your valuable knowledge and insights during the 2021 Philippine-Korean Youth Forum organized by UP Ariang and co-presented by UP Korea Research Center and Pinoy Scholars sa Korea, given this 22nd day of April 2021. Likewise, for Dr. Joeffrey Calimag, we would like to present this certificate of appreciation for your time and contribution here at the Philippine-Korean Youth Forum, signed by UP Ariang President Cassandra De La Cruz and UP Ariang Advisor Dr. Chong Min Bae. We will be sending a copy of the certificate via email and also through mail post. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now, to wrap up,
Adnan, yeah. Last request. Can you send us a link of this? The broadcasting,
okay,
the file as in terms of link. We would
okay,
appreciate, yeah, receiving that.
okay, sir. We will be
Mhm.
sending it via email. So now
Okay.
to wrap up, UP Ariang would like to thank our speakers, delegates, and everyone who streamed today's session under the economy and trade track, and also for streaming this with us since Tuesday. And PKYF is a week-long event organized by UP Ariang, co-presented by UP Korea Research Center and Pinoy Scholars of Korea, made possible by APOP and JK Network Services, in partnership with ADSA Animo, Anyong PNU, and UP Uyo Muyo, in cooperation with Blue Hanguk Society and FEU International Studies Society. Also brought to you by Ateneo Celadon and co-promoted by Korean Cultural Center in the Philippines. So tomorrow will be so on Saturday will be the first day of our forum proper, and we'll anticipate our delegates under the Arts and Media track and Governance and Diplomacy track to join us. Again, I am Madarna from UP Ariang, and this is Philippine-Korea Youth Forum #Transcending Borders.
Thank you, Adarna.
Thank you, sir.